Hey guys, tonight we journey to a time of gold-stacked caravans, candlelit scrolls, and skies thick with stars, each one whispering secrets to the only man the king trusted to listen. You walk quietly across the sandstone tiles of Mansa Musa's palace in Timbuktu. The sun's just dipped behind the dunes, and already the air cools with desert hush. You pass guards in indigo robes, scholars perched under arched colonnades, and scribes cradling books like sacred pets. But you have a different task, one that involves planets, predictions, and the slight risk of being beheaded if you mess it up. You are the royal astrologer, after all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and the time you're watching this. I'd love to see where in the world the stars are shining down on you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the pillared corridors of the royal residence. Clay walls glow with the last stretch of daylight, and from somewhere down the hall, you hear the steady drumbeat of a griot rehearsing old tales of Mali's glory. It's always a bit theatrical this time of night. Someone lighting incense, someone else dropping heavy gold rings just to hear them clink on the tile. You pass a woman balancing 6 earthenware jugs on her head like it's nothing, and a teenage guard trying to whistle without being obvious about it. Your chamber is tucked behind the observatory, small, cluttered, and smelling perpetually of burnt fig leaves and goat tallow. You step inside and immediately kick over your brass quadrant again. The floor is littered with charts, the ceiling a mosaic of constellations painstakingly painted with real lapis and a bit of guesswork. You light your lantern. The oil sizzles. Shadows twitch across the walls. Tonight, you're supposed to divine whether Mansa Musa's upcoming inspection of the copper mines is favorable. He expects a 5-star review from the heavens. You sigh. There's a worn bench beneath the slit window, your favorite thinking spot. You lower yourself onto it and look out. The desert sky sprawls wide, the stars poking through one by one. You squint toward the dog star, then a faint wisp of Milky Way. Above the mosque, Jupiter pulses softly like a smug eye that knows something you don't. Time to work. You pull out your primary charting scroll, now frayed and patched in 3 places with camel hide glue. Venus is in conjunction with Mercury tonight, which usually means, well, if you're being honest, it mostly means people are going to talk over each other and misplace things. Not the worst omen for a mining trip. There's a knock. You flinch. It's a very specific kind of knock. Rhythmic, overconfident, and followed by the sound of someone adjusting their hat dramatically. It's Demba, the palace steward. Your presence is requested, he says, drawing out the syllables like honey off a spoon. The king is holding council. There is talk of journeying east. You gather your cloak, swipe a fig from your stash, and follow. The royal hall gleams even at night. Torches blaze. Musicians pluck soft tunes from stringed instruments you never remember the names of. Musa sits at the center, flanked by generals, scribes, and a man who smells strongly of date liquor and owns 6 parrots, none of which are present, but he will tell you about all of them. Musa gestures for you to kneel. You do. You don't breathe. We travel in 2 months, he says simply, to inspect the copper mines, then east to the caravan cities. What do the skies say? You shuffle your scroll forward, feigning confident authority. The skies are moderately enthusiastic, you offer. There is harmony between the sun and Mercury. The trip bodes well if started on a waning moon. The man with the imaginary parrots nods sagely. Mercury, messenger of riches. You blink. Sure, let's go with that. Musa, always composed, studies your face with those eyes that can read gold weight just by looking at it. Prepare a chart for the departure, he says, and send your notes to the herbalists. I want their mixtures adjusted accordingly. You bow. The meeting ends. As you leave, you overhear a general mutter. Last time he said the moon was tired and we ran out of water. There's a snort of laughter. You pretend not to hear. Back in your chamber, you resume your work. You chart planetary motion with a compass made from elephant ivory, trying to remember if the second Saturn retrograde last year caused any kind of fish shortage, or if that was just bad storage. Your favorite reference scroll, the blue one with the marginal notes about leeches, is missing again. You curse softly and reach for a backup, only to find it's been nibbled on by beetles. Again! You resolve to write your own notes this time. With your knees tucked under you and a crooked feather quill in hand, you begin a fresh chart. Mars rising, Moon in Taurus, Saturn drifting suspiciously close to your coffee stain. You glance at the stars through the slit in your chamber wall. They look the same as they did yesterday, but something in your gut stirs. Maybe it's just the fig. Later, just before sleep sneaks up on you, there's a scratching sound. You look up. A small scroll has been slipped under your door. You open it slowly. It's unsigned, written in a nervous, rushed hand. The stars whisper different truths to different men. Be careful what you choose to hear. You lean back. Classic court games, or maybe something more. You roll up the scroll and tuck it beneath your pillow. The night stretches long and soft. From the garden, you hear frogs begin their strange desert song. You lie down with your face to the stars, a little easy, a little curious, and fully aware that tomorrow you'll be asked to explain to a council of poets why a red moon doesn't mean their hearts are cursed. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will be a lot. But for now, the stars hold steady. Your hands smell like goat skin and mineral ink again. No surprise there. You've been hunched over a low desk since sunrise, elbow deep in scrolls, grinding pigments and muttering curses under your breath at a new apprentice who can't seem to distinguish between ochre and cinnamon. This is your second home, what the palace calls the scriptorium, but what you call the oven of dust and regret. A long, shaded chamber tucked behind the mosque, lined with bookshelves and narrow windows. Everything in here is somehow both sacred and falling apart. You pass your fingers along the faded spine of an old Arabic volume on lunar motion. The leather binding peels like sunburnt skin. Some of these scrolls are older than the palace itself, traded from Andalusia, Cairo, even far-off Gujarat. Others were copied here, painstakingly, one uneven line at a time, by squinting scribes with poor posture and strong opinions. You're currently correcting a transcription error where someone decided Mars had emotions. You sigh. Mars has a lot of problems. Emotions aren't one of them. Today's task is equal parts boring and vital, duplicating a sky map for Musa's private collection. That means no embellishments, no poetic metaphors, and definitely no sketching tiny lions into the constellations. You did that once, and your scroll was ceremoniously burned while a noble looked at you like you'd farted during prayer. You sit, gently unroll the chart, and dip your quill into a tiny ceramic pot. It's filled with ink made from boiled bark and goat bile. The smell? Imagine socks, vinegar, and a hint of desperation. You hold your breath and begin. Line by line, the stars return to the parchment. Polaris first, then the 7 hunters. You draw tiny dots with trembling care. The paper crinkles beneath your hand, still warm from sunlight despite the shaded room. Somewhere across the hall, a scribe sneezes into a scroll. There's a pause, then a mortified whisper. "I'll start over." You get it. A page from a medical manuscript flutters near the window. You catch it mid-air. It describes a cure involving crushed dates, powdered silver, and a chant to Jupiter's 6th aspect. Probably fake. Probably also the reason someone's eye turned green last week. As the hours stretch, the room fills with that sluggish midday hush, the kind where even time feels sticky. You look over to your left. One of the junior scribes, Bakari, the one who always smells like onions, is writing upside down. He insists it's how he channels divine geometry. You insist he's inventing excuses not to correct his spelling. You decide to take a break. Stepping out into the courtyard, the sunlight blinds you. The air is dry, laced with the scent of hibiscus and fresh bread. You sit beneath the shade of a narrow fig tree and stretch your legs. Your knees pop audibly. You try not to take it personally. A pigeon watches you from a rooftop. You stare back. It blinks. You think about your place in all this. The palace, the scrolls, the relentless pressure of being the only person who can explain why Saturn's position might affect next week's tax collection. You think about leaving, running off to study in Fez or Alexandria. But then you remember those cities don't pay in gold dust and roasted goat legs. Plus, the stars wouldn't follow you the same way. Your break ends when a loud crash echoes from inside. You rush in. Bakari has tripped over a stack of astronomical glossaries and spilled ink across 2 reference scrolls. His face is the color of regret. You grit your teeth. One scroll is salvageable. The other, well, let's just say Jupiter now has a stylish new black eye. You clean up as best you can, muttering something about divine punishment for sloppy handwriting. You'll spend the next 2 nights redrawing the entire eastern sky quadrant. Still, there's a rhythm to the chaos. As the afternoon wanes, the scriptorium settles again. The scribes murmur quietly. You catch a snippet of gossip. Apparently, someone saw Musa's gold peacock blink twice. You tune it out and return to your desk. The final task of the day is aligning a lunar cycle diagram with the court's travel calendar. You carefully sketch the moon's phases, noting each date. This month, the full moon lands 2 nights before Musa's departure. That's auspicious, or ominous, or neutral, depends on who you ask. Historians still argue whether these alignments held actual weight in the decisions of rulers like Musa, or if it was more about tradition and theater. You suspect it's both. A little truth, a lot of performance. You remember a fringe theory you heard from a traveler once, that the dog star grants insight into political betrayal. Sounds absurd, but then again, you've seen stranger. Like the time a goat wandered into the observatory, chewed on a moon map, and then got stuck in the dome for 3 hours, while everyone claimed it was an omen of famine. Spoiler, it rained the next day. You finish the diagram. Your back aches, your fingers are smudged with ink. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the sky without charts, the stars without labels, the cosmos without your weary interpretations. It's terrifying and oddly peaceful. The bell for evening prayer rings across the palace. Everyone in the scriptorium pauses. You watch the light shift through the narrow windows, painting your desk gold. Then, a shadow falls across your work. It's an old man, Professor Jabir, the oldest scholar in Timbuktu and your sometime mentor. He smells of dust and rosewater and carries 6 pens in his robe like tiny swords. He peers at your chart. You've drawn Venus too close to Aries. You frown. It's deliberate. I'm accounting for the altitude correction at this latitude. He squints. Reasonable. Wrong, but reasonable. You sigh. He chuckles. He sits beside you, brushing crumbs off your parchment. You know, he says, once I predicted a famine based on Mars being too shiny. Musa forgave me, said it was the dust in the air, not Mars. Was it? He shrugs. Maybe. I just liked the way it sounded. You smile. Together, you tidy the scriptorium, scrolls rolled, inkpots sealed, charts pressed beneath flat stones. You walk home through the dimming palace, your mind thick with symbols and stars. A servant nods to you as you pass the granary, where tonight's meal simmers in huge clay pots. You think you smell cinnamon, or maybe Bakari again. In your chamber, you sit once more beneath the window. The sky above is now deep velvet. Stars begin their slow dance. You trace constellations with your finger in the air. Orion's crooked belt, the snake of the southern sky, the curved bow of Sagittarius. Shapes from another world, pulsing in this one. You reach for your journal and scribble a final note. If the stars ever lie, may it be with grace. Then you stretch, yawn, and let your eyes drift shut. The scriptorium will wait. The stars always do.
You're jolted awake by the sound of a goat sneezing. Not exactly the celestial sign you were expecting, but here we are. Blinking away sleep, you sit up on your mat. The room is still dark, touched only by the softest blue glow of pre-dawn. A chill snakes through the stone floor. Outside your window, the palace is quiet. No footsteps, no drums, not even the usual arguing between bakers about whose dough rose higher. Then the goat sneezes again, louder. You rise slowly and push open your wooden door. There, in the corridor, stands Sierra, the herb witch's goat, chewing thoughtfully on the hem of a royal tapestry. Sierra stares at you. You stare back. Not a portent, you mutter, just indigestion. You herd Sierra back toward the kitchens with minimal dignity. On the way, you pass 2 servants whispering over a broken jug of honey and a map splayed across the hallway floor. You catch the word Tagaza, the salt mines. Something's shifting. The court's preparing for a bigger journey than you thought. Back in your chamber, you brush sleep from your eyes and try to focus. Today, you're joining the King's Morning Council, a rare invitation. That usually means one of 2 things. Either you're about to be promoted, or you're about to be blamed for last week's solar flare. Either way, best not to be late. You throw on your cleanest robe, which is to say, the one with the least ink stains, and make your way to the council hall. The air is thick with incense and anticipation. The hall buzzes softly, like a hive before sunrise. Advisors lean over maps. Merchants whisper about caravan routes. Musa sits at the far end, his gold-threaded robes catching the light. He nods at you once. You bow and take your seat near the scholar's bench. It's a bit dusty and smells like old ink, but hey, so do you. A servant unrolls a scroll. We ride for Walata, the servant announces, then eastward. The king will inspect salt caravans, copper stocks, and establish new alliances along the route to Gao. Your heart skips. This isn't just a trip. This is a royal circuit. Weeks, maybe months of travel through the desert with the entire court. You're going too, obviously. The king will want his stars read, his omens checked, his dreams interpreted whenever he eats too much roast lamb. And so it begins. Later, you're summoned privately to Musa's chambers. The room is quieter than usual, the only sound the distant tinkling of a water feature shaped like a lion devouring a bowl of grapes. Tasteful. Musa leans forward, his gaze sharp. "I want to know," he says, "what the heavens say about this route. Not just the moon and sun, everything. Omens, symbols, warnings." You hesitate. You've studied the skies for years, but predicting the temperament of a 1,000-mile caravan, that's another matter. Still, you nod. "I'll begin the composite chart tonight. May I ask, what are you looking for?" He pauses. Then, softly, "Signs of betrayal." Ah, that.
Back in your observatory, the charts come out again. Your tools clatter across the table: brass compasses, feather quills, bone rulers, and that little carving of Anubis you use as a paperweight. Not because it's relevant, you just like dogs. You begin to layer multiple sky maps, adjusting for latitude, lunar cycles, known comet activity, and any documented solar flares. It takes hours. You only stop to gnaw on dry dates and mutter curses when you spill ink on Scorpio again. Somewhere around midnight, the stars begin to tell a story. Venus and Saturn drift into parallel with Mercury's lower arc, a rare formation. According to older texts, this was called the Path of Forked Tongues. Wonderful. You sketch the formation, annotate with footnotes, and begin writing a report so carefully phrased that it might as well be a bedtime poem for suspicious kings. It reads, "The alignment suggests opportunity, but not without deception. Travelers must beware of sweet speech and sand underfoot." Poetic, vague, and just unsettling enough to make Musa keep you alive. As you stretch your fingers, there's a knock. It's Professor Jabir again. He slips in without asking, holding a dusty scroll. "I thought you might want this," he murmurs. "It mentions the last time a similar alignment occurred, during the reign of Mansa Sakura." You blink. Sakura, the usurper king, the one who rose from slavery to the throne, only to vanish on pilgrimage, never returning. Some say he was killed. Others say he founded a city in the east and never looked back. You unroll the scroll. It's written in Old Mandé, smudged in places, but one passage jumps out. "Under the triple gaze of the cold planets, silence fell on the golden road. A traveler spoke truths no one wished to hear." Jabir watches you, his eyes twinkling. "You think this is a warning?" you ask. "I think," he says, "that if you're not careful, you'll become the traveler." Well, that's not ominous at all. The next few days are a whirlwind. The palace shifts into departure mode. Tents are checked, camels weighed, spices sealed in clay pots. You see court musicians arguing over which instruments to bring, and a food taster faint after biting into something labeled experimental mango jerky. You spend your time packing scrolls, preparing travel star maps, and writing small charms to be tied around the necks of key officials. One charm reads, "Safe travels. Avoid arguments under full moons." Another says, "If your camel sneezes 3 times, dismount." People think you're joking. You're not. Historians still debate the exact routes taken during these royal circuits. Some claim Musa's court followed older Songhai trade paths. Others argue for newer, more politically charged routes designed to assert dominance. What's certain is this: wherever the caravan went, power followed. You finally speak with the caravan master, a wiry man named Salif who measures everything in camels. He frowns at your scrolls. "You'll need a pack goat for your ink," he says flatly. camel sway ruins fine lines. You look at him. "Are you offering me a goat?" He nods. "You're my new favorite person." The night before departure, the palace holds a send-off feast. Drums echo through courtyards. Dancers whirl in gold-trimmed robes. Platters of grilled fish and honeyed pastries vanish faster than you can blink. Musa raises a toast to fortune and wisdom. All eyes turn to you. You raise your cup. "To clear skies," you say, "and clear motives." Half the court laughs. The other half looks mildly offended. You spot Jabir across the room, raising an eyebrow. You shrug. Later, under your favorite fig tree, you sit with your journal. The moon glows silver above the rooftops. Sira the goat waddles past with something in her mouth that might be a scholar's sock. You write. A journey begins with maps and stars, but it ends with truths only sand remembers. You close the book and lean back. Tomorrow, you ride east, towards salt, sky, and secrets. The stars above shimmer, watching, always watching. You wake up to a drum beat that isn't quite musical and isn't quite gentle. It's the kind of drum beat that means, "Get up now, or someone's camel will trample your tent." You sit up groggily on your straw mat, blinking at the fabric ceiling above you. Outside, dawn is just beginning to stretch her arms across the savannah, bathing everything in a soft orange glow. Dust rises from 100 busy feet, human, camel, and goat alike, as the court caravan stirs to life. It's departure day, and you, humble servant of the stars and slightly unwilling desert traveler, are officially on the road with the most powerful man in West Africa. You stuff your few belongings into a leather satchel: quills, scrolls, dried apricots, a small brass astrolabe that never quite worked right but looks impressive when you hold it up, and step outside into the crisp morning air. The caravan sprawls before you like a slow-moving city. Brightly colored tents collapse into bundles. Camels grunt indignantly as they're loaded with crates of salt, bolts of indigo cloth, and barrels of something that smells suspiciously fermented. You spot Salif, the caravan master, yelling at a page who accidentally tied a cooking pot to a camel's tail. The page now looks like he's reconsidering all of his life decisions. Your goat is waiting for you. She's not technically your goat, but after yesterday's discussion about ink stability, Salif insisted you travel with one. You named her Equinox. She doesn't listen to commands, but she does follow you with unsettling commitment. As you double-check your charts and maps, a servant approaches with a scroll bearing the royal seal. You unroll it. It's Musa's morning query. When should we break for midday prayer? You scan the sky. Venus still faint, Jupiter high. You calculate angle, shadow, and motion. 2 hours after the sun hits its apex, you write back. You want to add, if we're not being chased by bandits, but you resist. Once everything is ready, the caravan begins its slow, lurching journey out of the palace grounds. You walk beside the scholars group, Jabir, of course, and 2 young scribes arguing about whether you can calculate eclipses without offending local spirits. Only if you use red ink, says one. Red ink is forbidden, hisses the other. You sigh. Use blue. Spirits hate blue. They stare at you, mouths open. You walk faster. As the day warms, the rhythm of the road takes over. Camels groan, bells clink. Someone starts singing a slow chant about cinnamon and heartbreak.
You learn quickly that travel with royalty is both luxurious and absurd. Every few hours, a shaded pavilion is erected so Musa can rest. Fresh fruit appears like magic. So does roasted meat. A small orchestra tunes itself at sunset, even in the middle of the dunes.
Meanwhile, you're scribbling notes, adjusting your sky map, and trying to keep equinox from eating your ink bag. By the third day, the desert begins to show her personality. Not just heat, though there's plenty of that. It's the silence. The wide, empty spaces that seem hum. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like you're walking across the palm of something ancient. One night, just after dusk, Musa calls for you. You're led to a small tent illuminated by oil lamps. The king is seated on a rug, alone, save for one dish of spiced lentils and a silver water pitcher. He gestures for you to sit. "I had a dream," he says. Of course he did. In it, the moon turned to stone. Then it fell into a river. The river caught fire, and then I heard a child laughing. He looks at you expectantly. You blink, stall for time by sipping water. "Well," you say slowly, "the moon turning to stone could symbolize rigid truth, a truth that was once soft becoming immovable. The river, perhaps change, emotion. Fire atop it, that's conflict. And the child, the unexpected, joy where there should be none." Musa frowns. "So, a bad omen." You shrug, "Or a test. Truth meets change, and only a fool laughs. Or maybe the child knows something we don't." He nods slowly, but you can tell he's thinking hard. Historians still debate the role dreams played in Musa's decisions. Some say he relied on prophecy as much as policy. Others claim men like you shaped the course of empire from within the folds of dream logic and metaphor. You don't know which is true. You just know when a king asks for meaning, you give him one. The next day, a minor incident confirms everyone's superstitions. A camel collapses while crossing a dry wadi, taking a cart of copper bowls with it. No one's hurt, but the sound echoes across the sand like a thunderclap. Jabir mutters something about omens. The musicians stop playing. You glance at the sky. The moon is missing, hidden behind a thin sheet of clouds. At camp that evening, the tension is thick enough to stir with a spoon. The cooks burn the millet. One servant drops a crate of gold beads into the sand. Your quill snaps twice. Equinox bites a guard. You sigh and decide it's time for a distraction. That night, you gather a few scribes and begin telling stories. Gentle, strange tales pulled from your time in Timbuktu. Like the tale of the astrologer who tried to predict the taste of new foods using planetary conjunctions. He correctly guessed the flavor of honey-roasted locusts, but failed miserably with salted melon. The king banned him from dinner for a month. Or the wandering monk who claimed to be able to hear eclipses. He was mostly ignored, until one evening he shrieked during dessert, fell unconscious, and, right on cue, the moon vanished behind Earth's shadow. You don't know if it was real, but you do know the court refused to eat sweetened plantains for weeks after. The scribes laugh, finally relaxing. Someone brews a pot of date palm tea. The fire crackles. You look up at the sky. The clouds are gone now, and the stars spill across the black like scattered seeds. You trace a familiar arc with your fingertip, the Camel's Spine constellation, known only in old Fulani sky lore. According to legend, it carries lost souls across the heavens, a quiet beast of burden, silent and wise. You whisper the story to yourself, not because anyone asks,
but because the stars deserve to be remembered. Eventually, the laughter fades, the fire dies down. You lie on your blanket, head tilted to the sky, and let your breath slow. The road stretches ahead, weeks more of desert, of salt and signs, of dreams and dust. But for now, there's just this moment. The stars blinking softly, equinox snoring nearby, and the faintest breeze, like a sigh from the sky itself. You wake with sand in your mouth and a camel's tail dangerously close to your nose. It takes you a moment to remember that you're not back in your observatory. There's no ink-stained pillow, no scrolls stacked high enough to crush you in your sleep. Just sky, wind, and the scent of morning bread wafting through camp like a divine bribe to sit up. You brush grit from your face, glare half-heartedly at the camel, and rise. The caravan is already stirring, tents flapping, fires crackling, servants scurrying like caffeinated ants. You find your goat chewing on a boot that doesn't belong to either of you. Of course. Equinox, you sigh. We talked about boundaries. She ignores you, obviously. Breakfast is millet porridge and dates. You eat with Jabir and a few tired-looking scribes, all of them hunched over maps like vultures over a particularly stubborn carcass. One of them mumbles about topography. Another swears the river shown on the scroll hasn't existed in 70 years. The sky changes, you offer gently. So do rivers. They groan in unison. Soon, the royal tent flaps open, and out steps Musa, regal as ever despite the dust. His robe is gold-trimmed and almost definitely freshly laundered. You're not sure how. Laundry in the desert is a kind of witchcraft, but you suspect a team of attendants is involved. He surveys the road ahead, then gestures to his inner circle. Today's destination is Tchit, a settlement perched on the edge of the Sahel, famous for two things: its centuries-old cliff dwellings and a bakery that sells date-stuffed bread so good it's probably illegal in 3 kingdoms. But to get there, you'll need to cross a stretch of desert known for its unpredictable terrain and its uncanny echoes. As the caravan moves, you walk beside Jabir again. He tells you, in his usual calm drone, about the sandstone formations that whisper when the wind moves just right. They say the rocks speak in forgotten tongues, he says. You squint. Is that your poetic way of telling me the terrain is unstable? He nods, also haunted. Naturally. Midway through the day, the terrain shifts. Gone are the soft dunes of the earlier days. Now you're among low ridges, rocks like broken teeth, and narrow trails winding between ancient stone outcrops. The sun glints off surfaces in strange ways. Shadows move even when the wind does not. And the whispers begin. At first you think it's your imagination, a flutter of wind, a trick of acoustics. But then you hear it clearly, a low murmur, just beyond understanding, drifting along the stones like a secret passed hand to hand. You freeze. Equinox freezes. Jabir walks straight into a rock. Everyone stops. Musa himself turns in the saddle of his lead camel. Do you hear it? You nod slowly. There's no language to it, no words, just sound, like breath, or humming, or memory itself. Historians still argue whether the region's talking stones were mere wind phenomena or early forms of communication. Some claim they reflect the acoustics of ancient ceremonies performed among the cliffs, while others insist they're just eerie coincidences. You're starting to lean toward whispers from the past. The king dismounts, walking to a small ridge. You follow reluctantly. Atop the rock shelf, the view expands. The path winds through narrow channels and ends at what looks like a series of ruins, low, squared-off buildings carved directly into the hillside. Weathered staircases, arches worn by sand, and dozens of tiny nooks once used to store grain or prayers or both. Tichet. Not the main city. This is an outpost, an older one, a place forgotten even by the road. Musa turns to you. Tell me what you see. You pause, then speak slowly, like reading from a dream. Ancestors' breath, stone that remembers, a city carved from patience, and silence that listens back. He nods once. Good. Then you'll lead us through. Wait, what? Before you can object, Jabir pats your shoulder. You'll be fine. Just watch for shifting rocks and ghosts and snakes. Encouraging. You step carefully down the ridge, charting a safe route between collapsed walls and weathered walkways. The caravan follows behind, slowly, respectfully. Even the camels are quieter than usual. One even chews in silence, which feels unnatural. As you guide the group through the ancient outpost, you begin to notice things. Petroglyphs etched into stone, spirals, constellation patterns, simple figures of humans with outstretched arms. You pause at one carving, a human figure standing beside a crescent moon. Below it, smaller figures kneeling. You run your fingers over the marks, trying to decipher meaning. The moon and her people, Jabir murmurs behind you. This place once had a priesthood of sky watchers. You nod, kindred spirits. He smirks, hopefully with better sleeping arrangements. At camp that evening, Musa gathers his closest advisors in a makeshift stone courtyard. You're summoned, of course. A low fire flickers. The wind still whispers, but now it sounds less like threat and more like song. Musa speaks. We passed through old knowledge today, stones older than our lineage. They remember, even if we forget. He looks to you. Tell us what the stars see in these ruins. You close your eyes. Let the fire warm your skin. Then you speak softly, letting instinct guide your words. The stars say, this was a city of waiting, of watching, of listening for signs. It was built not for war, but for time. Every stone a memory, every silence a prayer. The group falls quiet. One of the generals mutters, "That's not a military reading." You smile. Then perhaps it's time the military listened. Even Musa chuckles at that. Later in your tent, you write by lamplight. Your journal is filling quickly. Tichet stones whispered today, not in fear, but in welcome. They remember the ones who watched the sky before me. I hope they saw me as kin. You pause, listening to the faintest echo ripple across the rocks outside. Then you add, either that or the wind just really hates me. You close the book, lean back, and breathe. Outside, the caravan sleeps under the stars. The wind hums. Equinox snores. And somewhere, deep beneath the sand, the past waits patiently for the next curious fool to ask it questions. You dream of stars blinking in patterns you don't recognize. Slow, deliberate flickers like ancient code. But when you wake, they're gone. Just sky, just wind, just the quiet exhale of a new day in the desert. There's a knock at the tent flap, polite but persistent. You grunt. His Majesty requests your presence, comes the voice. Of course he does. You emerge into the light, blinking. The sun is just beginning to scrape its way up from the horizon. Sand gleams like powdered gold. The caravan is quieter than usual. Maybe people are tired. Maybe the ancient stones of Titchit whispered something unsettling into everyone's dreams. Or maybe it's the knowledge that today you begin the real stretch of the journey, the long, hot belly of the desert. When you reach Musa's tent, it's already dismantled. He's standing beside a camel draped in blue silk, flanked by his entourage, giving quiet orders. You clear your throat. He turns, nods once. "I've had a sign," he says. You raise an eyebrow, but say nothing. You know better. "A hawk," he continues, "this morning. It circled above camp, then vanished toward the east, the direction of Cairo." "And?" you ask carefully. "And we should ride faster." Faster? You suppress a sigh, glance at the road ahead. Less road than suggestion, really. Just a shifting sea of sand, broken only by the occasional thorn bush or lizard-shaped hallucination. You bow. "As you wish, Majesty." And so the pace picks up. It's not a gallop, thank the stars, but it's brisk enough to make you reconsider breakfast. Camels trot. Dust rises in great swirling gusts. The sun climbs higher and shows no mercy. You soon lose all sense of time. The landscape blurs into endless variations of days. You drink when you remember to, chew salted almonds, and wipe sweat from your eyebrows with a cloth that hasn't been cleaned since the second day of travel. At one point, a servant offers you a ride in one of the shaded litters. You decline. You've learned the hard way that riding inside one is like being gently cooked inside a velvet-lined oven. Instead, you walk beside Equinox, who is in surprisingly good spirits, mainly because she found a pouch of dried figs in someone's unattended supply sack. You look up, trying to orient yourself by the stars' ghostly positions behind the sun's glare. But the heat shimmers confuse everything. "Do you know what day it is?" you ask Jabir, who appears beside you like an overeducated mirage. "Thursday," he replies. "How do you know?" He shrugs. "I don't, but it sounds plausible." You both walk in silence for a while, surrounded by the low rumble of 100 hoofbeats, wheels creaking, murmured prayer songs from the guards. Eventually, you reach a well. It's a miracle, honestly. A deep, stone-lined pit with cool water and a bit of shade nearby. The caravan halts. Camp is made. Tents bloom like silk flowers. Musa retreats into shade, and you, miraculously, are left alone. You find a quiet patch beneath a tamarind tree and lie back, staring up at the canopy. And then, for the first time in days, you hear it. Silence. Not desert silence, not the tense quiet of expectation, just nothing. No talking, no hoofbeats, just the faint creak of your own joints and the occasional leaf flutter. You doze. When you wake, it's dusk. The world has turned orange and violet, shadows stretching long across the sand. You wander toward the edge of camp and notice something odd. A figure standing alone on a nearby rise, holding what looks like a harp. You squint, approach slowly. It's a griot, a traveling poet-musician, wrapped in robes the color of thunderclouds, strumming a slow, sleepy tune on a kora. You stop a few paces away and listen. The music is soft, deliberate, like someone pouring cool water across your sun-baked thoughts. Each note feels like a memory you haven't had yet. When he finishes, he looks up. "You're the stargazer," he says. You nod, "and you're the reason I'm not currently screaming into the void." He chuckles. "I tell stories," he says, "but not all of them are meant to be believed." "Neither are my star charts," you reply. You sit beside him. He plays again, and you talk. He tells you stories from across the Sahel, tales of desert spirits that braid your hair while you sleep, of children who can speak with frogs, of an emperor who kept a secret son in a jar. In return, you tell him about your latest calculations, how Venus and Mars are nearing conjunction, and how that probably means Musa's going to make an impulsive decision within the week. Or fall in love, the griot adds. Even worse, you mutter. You ask him why he travels alone. He shrugs. Because stories don't always want an audience. Sometimes they want to wander, like smoke. You watch the stars come out. One by one, they appear like old friends, familiar and steady. You notice the Southern Cross first, then the lion's tail, then the fractured arc of the prophet's ladder. The griot packs his harp. I go before dawn, he says, but if you see a crocodile walking backwards, tell him I said hello. You blink. That a code? No, he says, smiling, just a crocodile. And then he's gone. That night, you dream of a city made of mirrors. The people speak backward, and the stars shine from the sand, not the sky. You wake up confused, hungry, and with equinox standing on your foot. You glare at her. She licks your knee. It's time to move again. As the caravan pulls away from the well, you think about the griot. Historians still argue about the role griots played in the shaping of political memory. Some claim they were the true authors of royal identity, their songs carefully tuned to political winds. Others insist they were mostly ornamental, entertainers, not architects. You suspect the truth, as always, lives somewhere in the middle, between rhyme and reason, between harp strings and hidden stars. You write in your journal, met a griot, possibly a spirit in disguise, said hello to a crocodile, just in case. The day unfolds hot and slow. A sandstorm rises briefly in the distance, but veers off like a moody uncle. You pass a series of flat rocks where someone's carved symbols that might be old Fulani or might just be the world's first bad graffiti. One scribe insists it's a warning. Another thinks it's a recipe for beer. You take notes either way. That night, camp settles near a set of low dunes. The stars are clear, scattered thick across the sky like spilled stories. You sit beside Jabir again, sipping warm mint tea and sketching out the horizon. So, he says, what did the stars whisper today? You smile. They said, keep walking. The best questions haven't been asked yet. Your boots are full of sand again. You'd swear they were empty last night, but here they are, two tiny deserts with your toes as reluctant inhabitants. You shake them out with a sigh and slip them back on. Morning has barely stretched its arms, and already the heat is plodding. Still, there's something in the air today, not just heat and dust, but movement, an undercurrent of urgency. Musa calls the caravan together just after dawn. His eyes scan the horizon like he's searching for a particular color in the wind. The usual morning protocol is skipped. No ceremonial breakfast, no long-winded speeches about divine favor. Just one sentence. We ride to Walata. Walata. Even the camels seem to flinch at the name. A city of scholars and merchants nestled on the edge of the Sahara just before the Great Bend of the Niger. If Timbuktu is a library, Walata is a scriptorium with walls. A place where calligraphy is as valuable as gold and where arguments about proper vowel placement can last for generations. You mount up beside Equinox, who is now developing a taste for dried fish. No one knows where she finds it. You're beginning to suspect she has a side hustle. The road to Walata is not much of a road at all. It begins with flat, cracked earth that sings underfoot like broken glass. Then come the salt flats, blinding white plains that stretch to the edge of reason, covered in shallow pools that reflect the sky with unsettling precision. At midday, you ride through a salt caravan going the opposite direction. Dozens of camels piled high with slabs of crystallized salt, like glimmering coffins for forgotten gods. Their drivers, wrapped in indigo cloth, nod silently as they pass. One of them offers you a chunk of salt, grins, and says, "For your goat?" Equinox accepts without hesitation. You chew your lip, then ask, "How far to Walada?" He shrugs. "A day if the wind likes you, 2 if it doesn't, 3 if it hates your ancestors." Delightfully precise. As the sun sets, the horizon reveals a low line of earthen towers, just silhouettes at first, then slowly resolving into the famous adobe skyline of Walata. Soft curves, baked brick, and wooden beams jutting from the walls like ribs. You've never seen a city look so much like it was sculpted from a memory. You pass through the gates at twilight. The streets are quiet, cobbled with sand and wisdom. Lanterns flicker in windows carved with geometric precision. Cats dart between archways. You can smell ink in the air, parchment, dust, and roasted lamb. Musa is greeted by a delegation of scholars wearing robes dyed so deeply they shimmer like wet ink. Their leader, a man named Al-Makari, bows deeply. "We have prepared the House of Scrolls for His Majesty's rest," he announces. Musa smiles. "And what of my astrologer?" Al-Makari glances at you. His expression is somewhere between amusement and mild horror. He may use the tower. The tower turns out to be a cylindrical library with a spiral staircase so steep it should come with a warning. You climb it with aching legs and arrive in a room filled with scrolls, books, celestial maps, and at least one mummified gecko wearing a monocle. You don't ask. That night, as the city settles, you open a scroll at random. It's a treatise on the movement of Jupiter, written by a scholar who appears to have loathed punctuation. You make it 3 paragraphs before falling asleep on the floor. You wake the next morning to someone loudly arguing about paper thickness in the courtyard below. You peek out the window. 2 scribes are locked in combat, verbal, not physical, over whether thinner parchment weakens the words it carries. A small crowd watches, utterly engrossed. You get the sense this debate has been going on for hours, maybe days. You descend the tower and step into the streets. Musa has gone to tour the House of Knowledge, an institution where books are copied by hand, then argued with for years. You follow. Inside, long tables hold half-finished manuscripts, astronomy diagrams, and letters from across the Islamic world. You run your fingers along the edge of a brass astrolabe. It's slightly dented, probably dropped during an argument about latitude. A young woman named Fatima gives you a tour. She's a scribe and mathematician who's been working on translating Greek astronomical texts into Arabic and then comparing them to African star lore. "It's like trying to argue with ghosts," she says. You ask her if the local scholars believe in astrology. She shrugs. "Some of us. Others believe the stars influence only fools." "Then I am very influenced," you say. She laughs. Later that day, you sit with Fatima and her colleagues in a cool stone chamber filled with cushions, mint tea, and far too many cats. They unroll a massive star chart, drawn in red and gold, showing not only the planets, but their associated elements, humors, and culinary preferences? "What's this symbol?" you ask, pointing to what appears to be a camel holding a spoon. "Ah," she says, "that's Jupiter in Taurus during the dry season. Very favorable for soup." You blink. Astrology is wilder here than I thought. Historians still argue, Fatima says with a grin, whether this chart is genuine or an elaborate joke. You nod. That's most of my research career, actually. Musa joins the gathering later, listens patiently, then asks, "Can the stars tell me if my gold will be well received in Cairo?" A long pause. You squint at the chart, then at the sky through the high windows. "If you don't give it all away first," you say. That earns a rare smile. Walata is different from every city you've passed so far. It's not grand like the capitals of Songhai, nor ornate like the oases of the Maghreb. But it thinks. You can feel it in the streets, in the air. Thought is currency here. Even the children play logic games in the alleys, shouting riddles and challenging each other to geometry duels. You wander the city alone that night. Under the stars, you pass a market square where musicians play slow desert jazz on lutes and drums. A seller tries to interest you in philosophical honey made by bees raised on Socratic debate. You buy a jar, naturally. It tastes like regret and thyme. You return to the tower and write. Walata glows from the inside. It hums with thought. I saw a goat reading a scroll today, possibly symbolic. Before you sleep, you climb to the roof and stare up at the stars. Venus hangs low, near the horizon. Mars flickers nearby. Their conjunction is almost perfect. A good omen, or at least a memorable one. You whisper to the stars, just in case they're listening. Guide us gently, please. We have more questions than gold.
Morning in Walata doesn't break. It spills, slow and honey-colored, through arched windows and down crooked alleyways. The city stretches its limbs, yawns through the calls to prayer, and settles into its favorite pastime, thinking loudly. You, however, are packing. The time has come to leave. You take one last look from the tower window. Down below, a scribe is chasing a goat that appears to have stolen a manuscript. A child is explaining lunar eclipses to a cat. Equinox is chewing on a scroll that might contain ancient prophecy. You sigh. You'll miss this place. By midday, the caravan gathers once more, banners fluttering against the rising wind. Musa mounts his tallest camel, a beast so dramatically decorated it looks like a parade float, and gives the signal. You begin the next leg of the journey. Now comes the true challenge, crossing the Sahara's belly. From Walata, the route bends northward across open desert, an expanse so vast and silent it could swallow time itself. The scholars warned you, this is the land where compasses hesitate, where the wind has moods, and where mirages whisper your name just to see if you'll look back. You tighten your cloak and move forward. The first few days are manageable. Long, yes, and hot, but there's a rhythm. You pass occasional rock formations shaped like frozen waves. You find the fossil of a fish halfway up a dune. You wonder how long ago this place was an ocean and whether the fish had opinions. But then comes the stretch known as the listening sand. No one agrees why it's called that. Some say it's because of the way it sings beneath your feet. Others claim it's the way sound travels, how a whisper can carry farther than a shout. The guides say it's because the desert listens to your thoughts and occasionally answers. You try not to think too loudly. The landscape changes subtly here. The sand is finer, almost like flour. It clings to everything, your scrolls, your teeth, your soul. At night, the silence deepens. It's not just the absence of sound, it's an actual presence. You lie in your tent and feel it pressing against your eardrums, as if the world is holding its breath. You dream of maps that change while you're looking at them. One morning, as the sun licks the sky with fire, Musa pulls you aside. "I had another dream," he says. You brace yourself. He continues, a city in the sand, made of glass, with no doors. That doesn't sound very accessible, you murmur. He ignores you. I want to find it. Of course he does.
There's a growing urgency in Musa. You've noticed it since Walata. His hunger for discovery has outpaced even his taste for gold. He wants something now, something undefined. A sign? A miracle? A message from the stars? You're not sure, but you sense the desert might be listening. The next day, a dust storm appears on the horizon. At first, it's just a faint smudge, like someone erased part of the sky. Then it grows, taller, thicker, rolling toward you with lazy inevitability. The caravan reacts quickly. Tents are dropped, camels are hobbled, faces are wrapped. Everyone becomes a bundle of fabric and instinct. You barely have time to dive into your tent before the world turns orange and loud. Sand screams against the canvas. The wind howls like it's naming every mistake you've ever made. You curl into a ball and try to pretend you're a well-adjusted person who isn't slightly convinced that this is divine punishment for that time you doubted astrology in front of a camel. Hours pass. When it finally fades, the silence returns with a thud. You emerge, coughing, covered in dust. The camp looks like the aftermath of a confused invasion. Tents half buried, camels blinking slowly, as if reconsidering the meaning of existence. Musa stands at the center, arms crossed, eyes narrowed toward the north. He seems pleased. This was the sign, he says. You raise an eyebrow. A storm? A cleansing. You don't argue. You're too tired. Later, over bland dates and spiced tea, you sit with Jabir, who's busy drawing a map with exaggerated mountains and suspiciously spherical oases. You think he's really chasing a vision, you ask? Jabir shrugs. He's a king. They don't always need reasons. You nod, then point at his map. You made that lake too round. Maybe it's round in spirit, he replies. You make a note in your journal. Storm, king, glass city, lake-shaped lies, stars still unbothered. You sleep hard that night. Too hard. You dream again, this time of a staircase carved into a dune, leading upward into the stars. At the top waits a figure cloaked in constellations, holding a compass made of bone. It offers you the compass. You reach for it. You wake up holding Equinox's hoof. She looks confused. You apologize. The next morning brings something rare, an encounter with another caravan. They appear over the ridge like shadows, tall Tuareg traders with camels draped in silver chains and painted blankets. Their leader, a man named Al-Miftah, greets Musa with a respectful bow. They speak briefly in Arabic, then shift to a Songhai dialect you don't know well. But you catch a few words: lost well, burning path, spirit guide. You nudge Jabir. Did he say burning path? He nods. Means a shortcut or a curse. Depends who you ask. That night, Musa invites Al-Miftah to his fire. They sit together under a sky so bright it looks powdered with salt, drinking tea so bitter it could erase bad memories. You're invited too. Musa leans forward. Have you ever heard of the city with no doors? Al-Miftah chuckles. Many have looked, none have found. But you believe it's real? I believe stories are real, whether or not they are true. You write that one down immediately. As the conversation drifts, you learn that Al-Miftah's caravan is headed toward Tuat, one of the great oasis systems of the Central Sahara, a place of date palms, ancient manuscripts, and water that tastes like rusted time. Musa listens, nods, then makes a decision. We follow them. The course changes again. Over the next days, you follow the Tuareg through winding dune valleys and over rock shelves that resemble the spines of buried giants. You learn to read the desert differently, by the shape of the wind's footprints, by how the stars shift when you blink, by the temperature of silence. One evening, Al-Miftah takes you aside. "You are the dream watcher," he says. You nod slowly. "Sometimes. Other times, I'm just confused." He smiles. "When the stars don't speak, do you still listen?" You think about that for a while. "Yes," you finally whisper. He seems satisfied. You begin seeing strange things. A line of fossilized trees still rooted in cracked stone. A wall in the sand stretching for miles, no openings. A pool of water that reflects the sky, but not your face. "Mirage," someone says. "Memory," says someone else. Historians still argue whether these structures were trade posts, religious outposts, or simply the dreams of early desert empires. You hear that phrase in your own voice, like a thought sneaking out. You write, "The desert keeps secrets, not to be cruel, but because it forgets loudly." On the 11th day of travel with the Tuareg, you crest a ridge and see it, a sea of green. Tuat. Palm groves stretch out like fingers, wells dot the landscape like punctuation marks. Low buildings cluster around the oases, carved from earth and sun. Water glitters. The caravan breaks into soft cheers. You exhale. The desert, it seems, has let you pass. This time, you've crossed half a world. The stars are still in place. The king is still dreaming. And somewhere, perhaps, the city with no doors still waits.
Tuat, they say, is a place where the desert learns to whisper in green. And sure enough, the moment you step into its palm-fringed edges, everything changes. The sand grows shy. The wind becomes polite. You can feel moisture in the air, barely, but enough to remind you that you're still a mammal with fragile needs like hydration and shade. Your camel snorts in relief. You consider doing the same. The oasis is no paradise, though, not exactly. It's more like a very sophisticated survival mechanism, a network of settlements strung together by ancient knowledge, shared water, and the unspoken agreement that cooperation beats death. The caravan is welcomed with quiet nods and open wells. No fanfare. Tuat doesn't boast, it observes. The local scholars, scribes, merchants, and water engineers seem only mildly interested in Musa's golden entourage. You, they like slightly more, mostly because you ask questions and don't interrupt when they're meditating over irrigation charts. The first night in Tuat is spent under domed ceilings of mud brick, thick enough to keep the heat out and your dreams in. You sleep hard, deep. You wake up with creases in your face from a woven mat and a deep appreciation for people who know how to design buildings with thermal mass. Then the research begins. Because this isn't just a rest stop. For you, Musa, and the other scholars, this is a junction, a neural hub in the great brain of Saharan knowledge. Tuat is where traders, imams, magicians, and mathematicians collide over spice-laced tea and ancient scrolls. And here, in the shaded corners of this oasis, is where you start piecing together the real web, the network that connects Musa's empire to everything else. You meet a blind librarian named Amar, who remembers trade routes like melodies. Gold from Wangara, he says, tapping the table, goes north to Sijil Masa, then Fez, then across the sea to Venice, maybe even further. Salt flows in reverse. Dates go everywhere because dates are gossip. You write that down. He adds, the real power isn't in the gold, it's in the promise of gold. You write that down too. Tuat is filled with these little truths wrapped in half smiles. There's a scholar here who insists some of the earliest Arabic star charts were copied from a Songhai astronomer's work 2 centuries earlier. There's an elderly trader who swears that a Phoenician coin once fell out of a fish's mouth in Tagaza. You remain skeptical, but you write it down anyway. One afternoon, sitting beneath a fig tree that refuses to grow figs, Musa joins you for tea. He's quiet, thoughtful. You know, he says slowly, I think the gold talks. You raise an eyebrow, like metaphorically? No, like it has stories. You sip your tea. That might be heat stroke. He smiles faintly. Or maybe we're listening wrong. Musa's interest in gold isn't just economic, it's mystical now. He asks questions about where the gold mines are, who works them, how deep they go, whether anyone has ever heard the earth hum before a strike. You start to realize he's not just chasing wealth, he's chasing meaning, a cosmic thread. And gold for him might be the glittering breadcrumb trail toward it.
You remember a conversation you overheard weeks ago in Walata. Gold is the earth dreaming. You didn't think much of it then. Now it echoes. The connection between gold and stars isn't entirely metaphorical, by the way. You learn from a Berber scholar in Tuat that some traditions link the color of gold with the sun's divine essence. That in certain early West African beliefs, especially among court mystics, the sun itself was seen as a giver of metal, casting fragments of itself into the earth. Historians still argue whether this interpretation influenced mining practices or whether it was retrofitted by religious authorities to sacralize commerce. But one thing's clear, in Musa's court, gold isn't just metal, it's mythology you can melt. Speaking of mythology, you finally visit the Caravanserai archive. It's carved into a hillside and guarded by a small tortoise who no one owns, but everyone respects. Inside, among walls that smell like warm leather and soot, you find a room full of ledgers, not just trade records, but dreams, predictions, and planetary positions from previous centuries. One document lists eclipse cycles, another, trade disputes mediated by omens. You feel right at home. One ledger in particular catches your eye, a listing of anomalous transactions. Things like a dozen ostrich eggs traded for a map of Atlantis, or a moonstone exchanged for one dream of a drowned city. Probably symbolic, hopefully symbolic. Still, you copy the entries carefully. That night, over smoked lentils and dates, Musa asks, "Do you think we've misunderstood gold this whole time?" You blink. In what way? Maybe it's not wealth, he says. Maybe it's language. You nod. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds great, and you can already hear yourself saying it later at parties. A few days later, the caravan prepares to move again, north this time, towards Sijil Masa, then Fez, then the Mediterranean. But not everyone's coming. Jabir has decided to stay behind in Tuat. I like the tempo here, he says. No one tries to be profound before breakfast. You hug him. He hands you a scroll wrapped in goat hide. Star tables, he says, just in case the sky starts acting strange. You ask if it will. He grins. It always does. Before you leave, you take a moment alone up on the ridge just outside town. You look back at the oasis, its soft haze, its tiled rooftops poking out like stubborn thoughts. You whisper a thank you to the wind. It doesn't answer, but it doesn't scoff either. The journey continues. Now, the desert becomes flatter, wider, somehow emptier. The horizon stretches so far that you feel like you're walking on the underside of the sky. Days blur. Camels mutter in their sleep. Musa grows quieter. Then, one morning, a cry goes up from the lead rider. You've reached Sigil Masa. It's not quite what you expected. The city is large, yes, and built from a shimmering gold-brown clay that bakes in the sun like bread. But it's the people who stun you. So many languages in one place, it sounds like the Tower of Babel got a travel visa. Here, traders from every corner of Africa, Arabia, and even southern Europe jostle over indigo, ivory, perfumes, glass beads, and, of course, gold. You're given lodging near a central plaza, where a well gurgles lazily, and children throw pomegranates at each other in a game you don't understand. Musa spends his days here quietly. No grand speeches, no ceremonial fanfare, just listening, watching. He meets with Jewish merchants who speak Arabic with a Moroccan twist. He visits the city's scholars. He touches walls older than his own great-grandfather's name. Something in him shifts. So does something in you. One night, while stargazing on the roof, you finally feel it, that vast, humming network you've only caught glimpses of before. The trade isn't just goods, it's ideas, rituals, words, star names, herbal remedies, techniques for taming horses, songs for childbirth, beliefs about the afterlife. The Sahara, terrifying and vast, is also a corridor of conversation. And the gold? That's just the part we remember best.
By the time you set foot in Fez, your boots are more philosophy than leather. They carry stories now, etched into every crease. A tale of rain in the desert, the scent of ancient ink in Tuwat, the aching quiet of Sigil Masa's rooftops. You're not just walking, you're gliding on memory. Fez hits you like a song with too many instruments. The city hums, clatters, sings, and smokes all at once. It's both chandelier and labyrinth. The buildings lean in, conspiratorially narrow. You swear the alleys are alive, adjusting themselves just slightly to lead you somewhere or lose you completely. And the smell? Oh boy. A mix of cedarwood shavings, olive soap, tanneries, cardamom, and something like boiled goat hair. You gag, you smile, and you keep walking. The court is hosted by one of the city's leading imams, a man with eyebrows so thick they seem to gesture before he speaks. He welcomes Musa with grace, and you with mild suspicion that softens once he learns you study the stars and don't talk loudly at dinner. Fez, you soon learn, is a city where even the shadows seem educated. Every corner of the Medina whispers verses of poetry, or equations, or treatises on ethics. At the Qarawiyyin library, the calligraphy on the walls alone could teach you 3 new ideas before lunch. You're not even allowed to touch the books until you've washed your hands and your intentions. And yet, here among the ink-stained tiles, you feel oddly at home. You're invited to sit in on a symposium. Yes, that's what they call it, a symposium, where scholars debate whether the moon is made of crystal or polished brass. You say nothing, of course. You just eat the honey cakes and write everything down. Musa seems changed here, slower. He walks like someone reading between the lines of a very long poem. His guards don't know what to do with themselves.
They shine their boots twice a day and practice looking humble. Then comes the invitation from Granada. Yes, that Granada, Al-Andalus. A courtier arrives with robes finer than most curtains and a message bearing the Nasrid seal. Musa, your fame precedes you. Come, visit, talk, be seen. Bring your astrologer if he isn't too strange. You're not sure if that's an insult or a compliment. You accept anyway. The journey northward changes everything again. The caravan now skirts the edge of the Rif Mountains, which roll like sleeping camels beneath a soft green quilt. The air cools, olive trees appear, so do vines. The scent of the Maghreb settles in, damp stone, rosemary, citrus. When you reach the port city of Ceuta, you actually gasp. The sea, real, actual sea, glittering, endless, moodier than a bored cat. You'd almost forgotten water could move like this. Musa just stares. He's never seen it before.
That night, you camp on a bluff overlooking the strait. Across the water, faint in the distance, Spain looms, dusty blue and secretive. Musa says nothing for a long while. Then, the edge of the map doesn't look like I thought it would. You nod. It rarely does. He adds, I wonder if I'll know less once I know more. You scribble that down, pretend it's your own. The voyage across the water is both terrifying and, let's be honest, embarrassingly seasickness-filled. You cling to the railing like a baby lemur. Musa fares better, but even he grows a bit pale when the waves slap the side too hard. Still, there's something exhilarating about watching the land vanish behind you, replaced by a heaving canvas of sea and sky. You pass seabirds that look like tiny, angry librarians, and a floating coconut that somehow feels like an omen. Then, the port of Almuñécar greets you with seagull cackles and a smell of fish stew. You've made it to Al-Andalus. Granada is not far inland, cradled by mountains, touched by snow even in spring, and scented with orange blossoms and revolution. Its streets are cleaner than Fez, but more anxious. Everyone seems a little too polished, like they're waiting to be conquered or congratulated. You're escorted to the Alhambra, and yes, it lives up to the hype. Red walls that burn with the late afternoon sun, pools that reflect the sky with unnerving clarity, arches that look like they were braided by angels. If poetry became architecture, it would be this. You walk its gardens in a trance. The fountains burble with wisdom. The cypress trees lean toward secrets. One lizard watches you with open disdain. You love it here. The Nasrid Velir receives Musa in the Court of Lions, where marble beasts hold up a fountain that sings louder than the politicians. The emir is young, charming, and vaguely exhausted. You suspect he knows history is nipping at his heels. Still, he's intrigued by Musa's fame, and even more by you. An astrologer from Mali? With real records? With a memory like a camel and jokes that don't involve bodily functions? You're invited to speak before the court. You do, softly, using your sleepiest voice. You talk about the rhythms of the desert sky, the weight of gold, and the dreams of migrating swallows. You throw in a zodiac reference, a comet anecdote, and one slightly scandalous theory about eclipses being the Earth's eyelids. The emir applauds. You're offered 3 books, a scroll, and a pear. You take all 4. During your stay in Granada, Musa meets with scholars of Arabic poetry, Jewish astronomers, and a Christian monk who claims to have visited Ireland in a dream. The 3 of you share lunch once and end up inventing a calendar that only works if you believe in dragons. Historians still argue whether this calendar was satire or a genuine mystic experiment. You're not telling. But it's not all joy.
There's a tension here. You feel it under the tiles, in the way the guards glance westward, as if watching for ships with crosses on their sails. Granada is glorious, but fragile. Still, it teaches you something you didn't quite expect. Every great city thinks it's the center of the story. Timbuktu, Fez, Granada, even the stars. But you begin to suspect that the real center is motion. Trade, thought, migration, curiosity. That restless tug pulling humans across deserts and oceans and empires. One afternoon, while drinking almond milk on a tiled bench, Musa turns to you. "Would it be mad," he says, "if I built something back home, not just a city, but a mirror of everything we've seen?" You lean back. "Not mad," you say, "just ambitious." He nods, and in that nod you see it, the glimmer of a vision, a city of scholars, of books, of libraries bigger than markets, where gold is not just traded, but questioned, where maps are drawn to be outgrown, where the stars are studied not to predict doom, but to find beauty. You both sit quietly as the wind carries a whiff of saffron and regret. The journey will turn south soon, but you know you're not returning to the same place you left. Neither is he. You leave Granada not like a guest who's been thanked, but like a bookmark slipping from between chapters, half finished, promising a return. Musa's entourage boards the ship with new scrolls tucked into leather bags, bits of tile wrapped in silk, and minds heavy with too much beauty. You clutch your journal like it might float if the ship goes down. Spoiler, it won't. The crossing back is mercifully calmer. No vomiting this time, just that low, creaking lull of the sea playing its long, lazy cello. At night, you lie on the deck with your fingers laced behind your head and watch stars spill their secrets across the sky like they're bored of holding them in. Back in Suta, you stretch your legs, buy 4 oranges, and vow to never again underestimate the luxury of citrus. Then, you follow the old road back into Morocco's belly, past Fez, past the Sharp Breath Mountains, and back toward Tuat. But something's changed. You notice it in Musa's stride. It's not heavier, just planted, purposeful, like a man who's seen the future in another country's hallway and decided he'd like to build it at home. One afternoon, as the caravan weaves through a palm-shaded gorge, Musa calls you to ride beside him. "I've been thinking about Timbuktu," he says, scratching the edge of his beard like it's a puzzle box. "Oh?" you ask, even though you know exactly where this is going. "We build it. Bigger, smarter, a center, not just for trade, for minds." You nod. The idea isn't new, but now it's armed with blueprints stolen from the corners of 3 empires. "Imagine," he continues, "a place where the poorest boy from the Sahel could sit beside the richest scholar from Cairo, where scrolls are copied faster than letters are lost, where people come not just for gold, but for knowledge." You nod. The idea isn't new, but now it's armed with blueprints stolen from the corners of 3 empires. "Imagine," he continues, "a place where the poorest boy from the Sahel could sit beside the richest scholar from Cairo, where scrolls are copied faster than letters are lost, where people come not just for gold, but for knowledge." You chew on a date and offer the obvious question. "And who will teach?" He smiles. "You will, for one." You nearly spit out the date. "I'm an astrologer," you protest. "You're a liar," he says gently. "You're a teacher. You've been teaching me for months." You say nothing, because, curse him, he's right. You're not sure when it started. Maybe in that chilly courtyard in Cairo when you pointed out the stars behind the minaret, or when you explained the shape of Saturn's path using bread crusts, or when you told the boy in Sigil Masa that he mattered because anyone who dreams under the same sky deserves to be heard. You sigh, scratch your neck, and say, "Fine, but I'm naming the library." "Done," he grins, "as long as you don't name it after yourself." You were totally going to. The journey back home becomes a slow swell of transformation. Musa drafts builders. You suggest architects. You argue over whether the script for the library's inscriptions should be Kufic, Maghrebi, or some strange new hybrid only you can read. Meanwhile, the gold keeps flowing. It's almost laughable how much of it still comes in, carried in bags the size of goat heads. But now, Musa doesn't see it the same way. He doesn't talk about its weight, he talks about its leverage. He starts bartering not just with merchants, but with ideas. He'll give a scholar a stipend if he'll tutor. He'll fund a manuscript copyist if they also trained 3 apprentices. He builds with gold, yes, but the blueprints are made of vision. Soon, rumors start spreading like warm honey across the region. Musa is building a city of books. A city where ink is more valuable than ivory, where a stargazer might outrank a spice trader, where memory itself gets a roof and a lock. And for the first time, scholars start coming to him. From Gadames, from Jenne, from Tripoli and Tunis. One shows up with a beard so long it gets caught indoors. Another arrives barefoot, claiming shoes distract his thoughts. You love them instantly. At night, you meet under the date palms near the river and talk until your tea goes cold. You argue about Aristotle, laugh about dreams, and wonder whether knowledge is like fire, spreading brightest in darkness. Musa funds the construction of Sankore, Jingureber, and Sidi Yahya, 3 mosques that double as centers of learning. And you write syllabi. You invent the concept of a traveling lecture, where you take students to the edge of the desert and teach geometry using dunes and shadows. You call it radical. Musa calls it you showing off again. One of your proudest moments is a 10-year-old girl named Yasira who learns to read 5 languages and recites star charts with her eyes closed. One day she asks, "Do the stars ever forget us?" You pause, and then you whisper, "Only if we stop asking them questions." She grins, that kind of grin that makes history feel like a pot about to boil. Meanwhile, other courts take notice. Cairo sends a formal letter requesting academic exchange. Fez sends an ivory box containing a student roster. Granada sends a pear. Again, it's delicious. But with growth comes unease. Some of Musa's advisors grow worried. "All this learning," one whispers, "it's good, but does it guard the borders? Does it feed the people?" You answer with a single sentence scratched onto the city's eastern gate. A wise city feeds the mind first, the body better. No one dares erase it. Historians still argue whether the great Malian Renaissance truly began in Musa's reign, or if it was simply the echo of older rhythms made louder by gold. But you know better. You saw it start, with a man who looked up one night and saw stars he'd never noticed before, with a scholar who said yes to travel, with a city that whispered, "Come, learn, grow." Timbuktu becomes not just a place on a map, but an idea. Children start calling you the Star Master. Adults ask you for horoscopes disguised as advice. You start a small group that teaches people how to map their family trees using constellations. You call it Skylines. It's cheesy. They love it. And so you stay. You write, you teach. You wander down to the river every sunset and thank it for being so stubborn. You still watch the stars, but now you see reflections of people in them. The city pulses around you, not with the clang of war, but with the soft turning of pages and the quiet thunder of young minds waking up. And that's power. The dry season comes back around with its usual drama: cracked earth, sulking trees, birds that look at you like it's your fault. But Timbuktu doesn't flinch the way it once did. There's infrastructure now, wells dug deeper, market shelves that don't empty at the first dust storm, schools that double as relief centers. Musa made sure of that. And you taught the apprentices how to read rainfall patterns in the sky. Everywhere you go, something's being built, and not just physically. Students construct arguments sharper than blades. Mothers memorize passages to teach their children by candlelight. Even the bricklayers trade proverbs between mortar batches. Timbuktu is turning into a library that accidentally became a city. But of course, not everything is certain. Not everything agrees. There's that group of wandering mystics who insist the stars are just the gods' buttons. There's a sour-faced scholar who refuses to accept comets as natural events, calling them sky spit. And then there are the archaeologists. Yes, early ones, sort of. They're not called that yet, but they act the part. One is a toothpick-thin man who spends his days digging near the Jinga Rebber Mosque, convinced it sits atop something older, something pre-Islamic and possibly extraterrestrial, he whispers. You cough into your tea and look the other way. Another is a woman from Takhaza, covered in salt dust and questions. She believes the city is built on a lattice of forgotten trade routes and that its true shape can only be seen from high above, if birds ever published maps. They all report to Musa eventually, who listens politely, then turns to you and mutters, "If one more person mentions ancient lizard gods, I'm canceling Thursdays." But privately, he's fascinated. And you? You start keeping a second journal, one for the strange stuff. The buried walls someone found 20 miles outside the city. The stories of singing stones brought in from beyond the Niger. The rumor that a chamber beneath Sankore hums on full moons. Historians still argue whether these accounts were early scientific records, desert legends, or elaborate jokes passed off as scholarship. You suspect the answer is yes. But one structure in particular grabs your attention. It's a tower, round, unfinished, tucked away behind what used to be a caravanserai. Locals call it the Silence Tooth. No one knows who built it. No inscription, no door. Just stone stacked in a perfect spiral, like someone was trying to point at the stars without drawing a straight line. You visit it often, sit beside it, press your ear against its cool flanks, and swear you can hear the faint echo of wind that hasn't blown yet. Your best guess? Some kind of celestial observation platform, a sun calendar, or a monument to someone who didn't care about being remembered. You write a short treatise on it, suggesting it's symbolic, a metaphor for endless seeking. You call it the Tower That Waits. It becomes unexpectedly popular among teenagers. They start carving spirals on their satchels. And then comes the delegation from Gao. They arrive unannounced, 10 horsemen, cloaks like rolling thunder, faces unreadable. They're here to study the city, they say, observe its learning, gauge its strength. Musa hosts them with courtesy, dinners, debates, tours of the libraries. But you catch the nervous glances between servants, the way the Gao men inspect buildings not with awe, but calculation. They ask about gold, about defenses, about who might lead next. You and Musa speak privately one night, watching lanterns flicker across the plaza. They're measuring us, he says. For what, you ask? History, he answers, or war. You both fall silent, because deep down, you know, brilliance never exists in a vacuum. It attracts attention, and sometimes attention comes with teeth. Still, Musa doesn't stop. If anything, he doubles down, funds another wing for Sankore, invites a controversial mathematician who claims he can square the circle using only goat entrails. He cannot. The city hums, and the people begin to dream in broader strokes. One student writes an opera, yes, an opera, about the formation of stars, performed entirely with clay flutes and humming. It's terrible. It's wonderful. Another creates a calendar that maps moods to phases of Venus. You trial it for a week and find yourself suspiciously optimistic. But the big shift? Language. Someone suggests standardizing the way manuscripts are copied, so future readers won't have to guess whether that loop means fish or philosopher. The first style guide in West Africa is born. You contribute 3 entries. Never use stars as punctuation. Always credit translators. And then the sky cracked open is banned unless the sky actually cracks. You become something of a traditionalist. It surprises everyone, especially you. But amid the joy, shadows gather. Musa grows slower, his walks shorter, his silences longer. He starts talking not about what will be, but what might remain. One night he calls you to the edge of the river. The moon glitters like spilled flour. "I've given my gold to the world," he says, "but my time is drying up." You shake your head. "You've got years." He doesn't argue. Instead, he gestures to the city's outline. "Tell me it'll last." You hesitate. Then, softly, "Only if we keep adding to it." He nods. "Then promise me," he says, "when I'm gone, you'll keep teaching, keep arguing with the stars, keep reminding them we're listening." You grip his hand, and it's warm, and you say, "I promise." That night, you dream of the silence tooth, but this time it's open, and something, not threatening, not loud, just light, is coming out. You wake up with a sentence in your head. The future doesn't need to be loud to arrive. And for the first time, you believe it.
The rains arrive late this year. They sneak in sideways, soft and moody, more drizzle than declaration. It's as if the sky isn't sure whether it should cry or just sigh. You walk through the alleys barefoot anyway, because puddles don't care about your sandals, and the streets feel like home now. Musa's health fades slowly, like the tail of a comet refusing to vanish. He still reads, still listens, still makes the occasional sharp joke that reminds you who really runs things. But you can feel the shift. He's become an echo just starting to stretch. One morning, before sunrise, you're summoned. He wants to go to the tower, the spiral one, the silence tooth. "You want me to wheel you?" you ask, half teasing. He lifts an eyebrow. "I want you to walk beside me, slowly." And so you do, past sleeping goats and yawning courtyards, past students whispering poems by firelight, past the growing skeleton of a new observatory that Musa commissioned just last month, his final blueprint. The tower is wet with morning dew. Its stones smell of memory and moss. You sit. He closes his eyes, and for a long time, neither of you speaks. Until, "Do you think they'll remember?" You squint. "Remember what?" "This," he says, motioning toward the horizon. "Not just me, all of it. The books, the questions, the quiet we fought for." You think about the students, the librarians, the messy, miraculous flood of thought that now courses through Timbuktu like an underground river. "I think," you say, "they'll remember the part where we tried." He exhales, that slow, gravelly, satisfied kind of exhale. A week later, he's gone. The city doesn't weep all at once. Instead, it pauses. Candles flicker longer. Markets close early. A single drum echoes across rooftops. Not fast, not ceremonial, just steady.
You take charge of the funeral procession's celestial alignment. The tomb is designed to face Sirius, because he once said it was the sassiest star. You knew he meant Sirius B, the invisible one. That was classic Musa. The scholars argue over which of his sayings should be carved above the door. You suggest, build mines and walls will follow. They agree, eventually. And then, well, then the city changes. Not all at once, but subtly. The new emperor, his son, is quieter, less interested in books, more concerned with border reports and grain stocks. He doesn't abolish the schools, but he doesn't fund them like Musa did. And yet, the momentum lingers. You can't stop an avalanche of ideas once it's begun rolling downhill. Libraries keep growing. Students keep arriving, now from the east and farther north. You meet one from the Ottoman court who speaks 4 dialects and has a theory that time moves slower during the Harmattan. You don't entirely disagree. A merchant from China arrives with silk maps and tea that tastes like starlight. You teach her how to chart the night sky without instruments. She teaches you how to fold paper into cranes. You fill your office with them, dangling from strings like migrating thoughts. But not everything grows forever. The tower, the silence tooth, begins to erode. Not rapidly, just a slow, stubborn flaking. Desert winds do what armies cannot. Some say it was never finished. Others think it was meant to crumble, like a sand mandala built skyward. You organize efforts to preserve it, but you also carve a message at its base. Let it fall. Let us rebuild. Historians will one day debate whether this was philosophy or laziness. Meanwhile, more strange things surface. A buried room near Sankor, filled with scrolls written in a language no one recognizes. Some say it's an older form of Tifinagh. Others whisper it's pre-human. You suggest it's just sloppy handwriting from a scribe with cold fingers. But you keep the scrolls, just in case. You start a private class, just 5 students, to study fringe histories. They call themselves the Dust Club. Their motto, truth is what survives the broom. One student, Kema, is particularly promising. Sharp eyes, laughter like a cracked bell. He's obsessed with the idea that every civilization leaves behind not just artifacts, but echoes. He thinks the wind carries memories, that maybe if you stand still long enough, a story will find its way into your skin. You let him run with it. His classmates think he's nuts. You think he might be right. Then comes the visitor. Unannounced, no entourage, just a man in plain robes with a scroll tucked under his arm and an accent you can't quite place. He claims he's from a place past the place maps end. He says he's looking for the keeper of unfinished questions. Your student points him to you. The scroll he carries, a treatise on time, with diagrams that make your eyes ache and margins filled with notes in 3 scripts. One of them, impossibly, is your own handwriting. You confront him. He just smiles. Ideas travel, sometimes faster than people. Then he leaves, just like that. You spend weeks trying to figure it out. Eventually, you give up and file the scroll under maybe. It joins the growing shelf of uncertain things, along with that polished stone that hums under moonlight and the compass that only points south. You begin to understand something Musa always knew. The most powerful thing in the world isn't certainty. It's curiosity. It's the itch that never heals, the question you keep asking even when the answer hides. One night, you sit alone on the roof of the library. The city murmurs below, soft, content, dreaming. You whisper to the stars, "We're still here." And they, in their usual way, say nothing. But you imagine they're listening, because how could they not? This city is now part of their story, and yours. And tomorrow, someone else will look up and wonder what you wondered. That's the real monument. Not gold, not walls, but wonder.
The first sandstorm of the season doesn't roar, it creeps. A quiet rustle, like the desert clearing its throat. You wake before dawn to the copper scent of dust in the air and a sky the color of ash water. No birds, no bells, just stillness. You've learned by now that storms aren't always signs of danger. Sometimes they're reminders that nothing built by hand is ever completely safe, that permanence is just the illusion we wrap around motion. Still, you walk the city. Check the shutters at Sankore, secure the tarps over the excavation near the well, tuck manuscripts into clay urns you designed years ago, your own trick for fending off the wind. You hum as you work. In the square, a group of school children stand with their backs to the gale, cloaks flapping like banners, laughing between gusts. One of them spots you and calls out, "Hey, stargazer!" You grin. It's stuck now, that nickname, and you don't mind. You taught their parents. You mapped their festivals. You're the reason their curriculum includes basic astrology right between geometry and irrigation techniques. And now, as the city braces itself, something strange happens. People keep working. They don't retreat, not like they used to. They adjust, adapt. The printer ties pages down with string. The astronomer shields her lens with leather. The bakers keep their ovens hot, kneading with dust-lined hands, because bread waits for no storm. It's not resilience, it's inheritance. This is the world you and Musa shaped. But while sand settles into crevices and cracks, another kind of drift begins. One that doesn't come from the desert. It comes from elsewhere. News arrives. The Moroccan Sultan eyes Songhai. The Portuguese have established trading posts along the coast. Scholars whisper that salt is no longer the gold it used to be. There are murmurs of gunpowder. The word sounds awkward in your mouth, like a future that doesn't need dreams to function. And for the first time in years, you feel old. Not tired exactly, just slightly behind. You spend more time indoors now, reorganizing scrolls, mentoring in shorter bursts. The students think you're being wise and mysterious. In truth, your knees just ache when it rains. Kema, the student who listens to wind, takes over more lessons. His methods are unorthodox. He teaches in riddles, uses music, carries a slingshot, but the students adore him. And you write. Not for publication, not for posterity, just in case. You begin what will become your life's strangest work, the Quiet Manual. It's part almanac, part diary, part dream map. Chapter 1, How to Read Stars Without Looking Up. Chapter 9, 3 Ways to Hide a Thought in a Recipe. Chapter 16, The Mathematics of Regret. You don't show anyone. Not yet, because some stories need to marinate. But outside, the tempo of the world quickens. Caravans arrive not with scholars, but with mercenaries. Traders speak of changing routes, shifting powers. Timbuktu begins to lose some of its luster, not because it's fading, but because new lights are rising elsewhere. A few libraries close. A few scribes sell their scrolls to collectors from Venice and Lisbon. Some of your students leave, chasing opportunity, chasing escape. You hug each of them tight, tell them to write. Most won't. But that's fine, because others stay. And something unexpected happens. They begin to sing. At first, it's small, just lullabies and chants. But then, rhythms build.
Someone crafts an instrument from gourd and gut string that sounds exactly like rain on canvas. They call it the kora, and when they play it, even the wind pauses to listen. The city learns the shape of silence again, but this time with melody threaded through it. You host secret concerts in the Eastern Garden, beneath the baobab trees. No chairs, just rugs, dates, and music that sounds like memory. It's not scholarly, it's not even structured, but it heals. And slowly you realize Timbuktu is shifting from a city of ideas to a city of feeling. And that's okay. Historians still argue whether this marked the decline or transformation of the city's golden age. You think maybe it was just adolescence ending. One night, you dream again of the tower, but this time it's covered in vines, not abandoned, claimed. A girl climbs it with a satchel full of poems. She reaches the top, looks up, and the stars blink back. You wake smiling. Outside, Kema waits with breakfast and bad news. Another scroll has been stolen, the one you wrote about rainfall cycles and comet intervals. No note, no sign of forced entry, just gone. You sigh, and then smile wider. Good, you say. It wanted to be read. That night, you gather your oldest students and finally read aloud from the quiet manual. They laugh, cry, one of them throws a shoe in protest of chapter 12. You take it all in, because this is what a court astrologer does, not just predict eclipses, not just chart Mars. You hold the line of mystery, and mystery doesn't vanish, it just changes language. So when the Portuguese send a letter requesting your presence as a scientific guest, you politely decline. You're busy. There's a new generation asking new questions, and you've got stars to argue with.
You sit in your old chair beneath the fig tree, a spot you once claimed only after watching a cat curl up there 5 days in a row. If a place gets feline approval, it must have magic in its roots. The fig tree's leaves tremble gently in the evening breeze. A crescent moon floats like a boat in the sky above, and a slow rhythm plays out across the rooftops. Snippets of laughter, a distant drumbeat, and that familiar hum of a city that has somehow not disappeared. It's been years since you read a star chart to a king, years since Musa's voice guided policy and your words carried royal weight. And yet, your name still lingers, not in court, not on scrolls, but in strange places. Someone painted it on the side of a clay kiln in the student quarter. Someone else used it as a metaphor for a thing that only makes sense at night. You like that one. The city has changed, again. The borders of the empire have shifted. New rulers come, dressed in silks that smell faintly of European perfume and pepper oil. They talk less of ancestors and more of ports. You nod politely, but you don't engage. Your world has shrunk on purpose. And within that small world, your garden, your scrolls, your circle of dreamers, things flourish. Kema's classes have outgrown the hall. He now teaches under the stars, writing equations in sand and having students erase them with their feet once memorized. His students call themselves the walking thinkers. They chant ideas in rhythm so they won't forget them. You still teach, sometimes, softly, one-on-one sessions with students who seek you out nervously like you're a fabled creature. You greet them with roasted dates and herbal tea. Always, ritual is the foundation of calm. And you listen more than you speak. Because the older you get, the more you realize the trick isn't knowing everything, it's knowing which question to ask. There's a story spreading through the city now. A comet has been spotted. Low on the horizon,
tail like a stretched lantern flame. Everyone's talking about it. Merchants claim it will bring good fortune. Fishermen fear it signals floods. A boy says it whispered his name. Kema asks if you think it's real. You smile. What does real mean? He throws a date pit at you. Later, you sneak out to see the comet for yourself. And there it is, hanging between two palm trees like punctuation in the sky. You think about how many times you've watched the heavens change. You think about Musa's funeral, the scrolls you've hidden, the languages you've never learned. And still, somehow, you feel unfinished, like a question someone meant to ask but forgot. Back in your study, your shelves groan with texts. Some are copied and copied again. Others are one of a kind, written in your own crooked hand with coffee stains and pressed flower petals tucked inside. One scroll, you realize, is blank. You must have stored it there absent-mindedly, thinking you'd use it one day. And now it feels like a dare. You unroll it, dip your brush, and write. If someone finds this, I hope you're curious. Then you keep going. No structure, no titles, just thoughts, on shadows and breath and the shape of memory. You write until your hand aches and your tea goes cold. Then you roll it up and hide it behind the third tile on the southern wall, your oldest hiding place. Outside, you hear footsteps. A young girl, maybe 7, peers through your gate. "Are you the star man?" she asks. "Sometimes," you say. She scowls. "My brother says stars are just gas and heat." You lean in, lowering your voice like a magician before a trick. Your brother's not wrong, but that's not all they are. What else? They're also very old secrets, you whisper, pretending to be lights. She grins and runs off. And just like that, another seed is planted. That night, Kema brings music. Not a concert, just a quiet strumming of the kora in your garden while the moon climbs higher. We sit together, no words, just sound, just breeze, just now. And you realize, this life wasn't the one you imagined. It wasn't filled with riches or monuments, but it was filled with questions, and that is more than enough. The fig tree rustles, a page turns itself in the wind, and somewhere, deep inside the old tower, a stone loosens, falling not with a crash, but a sigh. The city sleeps, the stars blink, and you close your eyes, just for a while, just to listen. The wind down begins below. Let your breath slow now, in and out. Feel the quiet settle around you like a familiar cloak, the kind that smells a little like old paper and fig leaves, soft with wear, warmed by time. The sounds of the city fade, one by one, like candles being gently pinched out. Footsteps turn into whispers, laughter into memory. Even the music softens, its last notes trailing upward into the sky like smoke rising toward the stars. You feel the weight of years, but it doesn't feel heavy. It feels grounding, like old stone beneath your feet, like roots beneath your thoughts. The night is deep now, deeper than silence. The kind of night that has room for dreams. And maybe, if you listen close, you can still hear the rustle of scrolls being opened, the scratch of brush on parchment, the faint sigh of someone discovering something ancient and small and beautiful. That's how wonder works. It lingers. It doesn't need a palace or a title or even a name. It just needs someone like you. Someone still awake, still curious, still listening. So rest now. Let the constellations turn above you. Let the past fold gently into your breath. You're not alone. The court astrologer walks beside you still, in ink, in stars, in dreams. And tonight, just maybe, you'll find a new question waiting in the quiet. Sweet dreams.